Cops handcuffed a single dad at his promotion ceremony, then realized he was facing a retired SEAL. "Sir, you can't do this. Not today." The young employee's voice trembled as two police officers pushed past him and marched straight toward the stage. The applause stopped. The smiles disappeared. The single dad who had spent 6 years working toward this promotion looked down at the certificate in his hands just as one officer grabbed his wrist. "Daniel Carter," the officer said, "you're under arrest for felony fraud." His 8-year-old son jumped from the front row. "Daddy!" The little boy tried to run to him, but another employee caught him before he reached the stage. "I didn't do anything," Daniel said quietly. "Please, my son is watching." The cold metal handcuffs clicked around his wrists anyway. Then an older man standing near the back of the room slowly removed his sunglasses. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone. He simply looked at the arresting officer and said, "You've just made the biggest mistake of your career. Stay with me until the end of this video because in the next few minutes you are going to watch 200 coworkers, a room full of police officers, and one company find out exactly who they were dealing with. Before we continue, if you believe in truth, justice, and the love of a father, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one." Now let's go back to the moment everything fell apart. The room went silent. Every phone that had been raised to record the celebration now hovered, frozen, capturing something no one expected to see. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your career." The voice was calm, steady, the kind of calm that only comes from a man who has seen far worse than a hotel conference room full of frightened onlookers. The officer holding Daniel's wrist turned toward the sound. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay back." "I will," the older man said. "For now." He slipped his sunglasses into his shirt pocket and started walking forward, slow, unhurried, each step deliberate. He was maybe 65, silver hair cut close, a weathered face that looked like it belonged on a mountain trail, not in a corporate banquet hall. But there was something about the way he moved, controlled, aware, like a man who had once walked into rooms far more dangerous than this one and made it out the other side. Daniel's son, Ethan, was still crying, held back by a coworker who didn't know what else to do. "Daddy, please tell them you didn't do it." "I didn't, buddy," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "I promise you I didn't." The officer tightened his grip. "Sir, felony fraud carries serious weight. You'll have your chance to speak at the station." "He doesn't need a station," the older man said, now standing just a few feet away. "He needs someone to actually read the file before arresting a man in front of his own child." The second officer stepped forward, hand resting near his belt. "And who exactly are you?" The older man reached into his jacket, slow enough that both officers watched his every movement, and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open. "Name's Walter Reyes, retired, 22 years, United States Navy. Most of that in places I'm not allowed to talk about at company parties." He let that sit for a second. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I've known this young man for 11 years. I watched him bury his wife. I watched him raise that boy alone. I watched him work double shifts so his son could have new shoes for the first day of school. And I am telling you right now, officer, that whatever piece of paper got you into this room today is wrong." The lead officer's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in front of an audience with their phones raised. "With respect, sir, we're acting on a warrant issued by a judge. This isn't up for debate." "Warrants get issued on bad information all the time," Walter said. "I'm not asking you to let him go. I'm asking you to give me 1 hour. 1 hour before you drag him out of this building in front of 200 people and a little boy who is never going to forget this moment for the rest of his life." The room was dead silent now. Even the caterers had stopped moving. Daniel's boss, a woman named Renata Cole who had personally recommended him for the promotion just 20 minutes earlier, finally found her voice. "Officers, please. I have known Daniel for 6 years. There has to be some kind of explanation for this." "Ma'am, I understand this is difficult to watch," the officer said, "but we have a signed warrant, surveillance evidence, and financial records tying Mr. Carter directly to a fraud scheme that cost this company nearly $200,000 over the last 4 months. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. $200,000? I don't even make that in 2 years. This is insane. I didn't touch anything I wasn't supposed to touch. Sir, you'll have the opportunity to explain that downtown. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly, the only visible sign that something inside him had shifted from concerned to focused. What surveillance evidence? He asked. That's not something we're obligated to share with you. No, Walter agreed. But it is something you're obligated to share with his lawyer. And I'd bet my pension that whatever grainy footage you're working off of doesn't actually show his face. The officer hesitated, just for a second, but Walter caught it. We follow the evidence we're given, the officer said finally. Step back, sir, or I'll have to ask you to leave the premises. Walter raised both hands slightly, a gesture of surrender that fooled no one who was actually paying attention. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly, but you should know, before you finish putting those cuffs on, that I already made a phone call on my way over here, to a friend of mine, retired federal investigator. 30 years experience, half of it working fraud cases just like this one. He's reviewing the case file as we speak, and if there's a hole in it, and there usually is when things move this fast, he's going to find it before you even get him processed. Nobody in that ballroom knew it yet, but the countdown had already started. The second officer glanced at his partner. Something unspoken passed between them. That's your right, the lead officer said. But right now, my job is to bring him in. He turned back to Daniel. Let's go. Ethan broke free from the coworker holding him and ran forward, wrapping both arms around his father's leg before anyone could stop him. Please don't take him. Please. He didn't do anything. He's the best dad. He reads to me every night, he never yells, he would never steal anything. Please. Daniel dropped to his knees despite the cuffs, pressing his forehead against his son's. Ethan, listen to me. Listen. I need you to be brave for me right now. Can you do that? The boy nodded through tears, his small hands gripping his father's shirt. I'm going to fix this, Daniel whispered. I promise you I am going to fix this, and I am going to come home tonight. Okay. You promise? Promise. Renata gently pulled Ethan back, kneeling beside him, holding him as the officers helped Daniel to his feet and began walking him toward the exit. Walter didn't follow immediately. Instead, he crouched down in front of Ethan, meeting the boy at eye level. Hey, champ. You remember me? Ethan sniffled, nodding slightly. Uncle Walt? That's right, Uncle Walt. He smiled gently. Your dad is one of the strongest men I have ever known, and I have known some very strong men in my life. Some of them jumped out of airplanes for a living. None of them were stronger than your father. You understand me? Ethan nodded again, wiping his face with his sleeve. I need you to trust me for the next few hours, Walter continued. Can you do that? Are you going to help him? Walter looked toward the door where Daniel was being led away, past stunned coworkers, past the promotion banner still hanging above the stage that read Congratulations Daniel Carter, Senior Operations Manager. Yeah, buddy, he said quietly. I'm going to help him. If this story already has your heart racing, take 5 seconds and drop a comment right now with the words "Truth always wins." It helps this video reach more people who need to hear a story like this today. Now let's go back 2 hours to find out how a father who never broke a single rule ended up in handcuffs in front of his own son. 2 hours earlier, none of this would have seemed possible. Daniel Carter had woken up that morning at 5:15. Same as always, careful not to wake Ethan as he moved through their small 2-bedroom apartment making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, because that was Ethan's favorite, and Daniel never missed making them on important days. Today's the day, buddy, he had said, setting the plate down in front of his son. Dad's finally getting that promotion. Ethan, still half asleep, had smiled anyway. Does that mean we get pizza tonight? It means we get pizza tonight. Daniel had worked at Meridian Logistics for 6 years. He started in the warehouse, moved into inventory management within 18 months, and eventually became a shift supervisor overseeing the company's regional distribution hub. Hadn't been easy. Not with a toddler at home and a wife whose health had been declining for reasons doctors couldn't fully explain until it was far too late. Sarah passed away when Ethan was 3 years old. Sudden cardiac complications tied to an undiagnosed condition nobody saw coming. One week she was healthy, laughing, planning Ethan's next birthday party. The next week she was gone. Daniel had nearly fallen apart. He would have, if not for one man. Walter Reyes had been Daniel's neighbor for 2 years before Sarah passed. A quiet, private man who kept to himself, tended a small garden, and occasionally waved from his porch. Daniel hadn't known much about him beyond pleasantries until the week of the funeral, when Walter showed up at his door with a casserole dish and a folding chair. "You don't have to talk," Walter had said. "I'll just sit here." He did that every evening for almost a month. Sometimes they talked. Most times they didn't. But slowly, Daniel began to understand who Walter really was. A man who had spent over 2 decades in the Navy, much of it as a SEAL, who had lost people too, in ways far more violent and sudden than Daniel could imagine, and who had learned that presence mattered more than words when grief hollowed a person out. "Grief doesn't leave," Walter told him once, sitting on that porch with Ethan asleep inside. "You don't get over it. You just learn to carry it without it crushing you. And you don't carry it alone. That's the mistake people make. They think strength means doing it by yourself." Those words stayed with Daniel for years. Walter became something between an uncle and a father figure, not just to Daniel but to Ethan as well. He taught Ethan how to fish. He showed up to school plays Daniel couldn't attend because of work. He never asked for anything in return. So when Daniel earned his promotion to senior operations manager, the first person he called wasn't a friend from work. It was Walter. "I want you there," Daniel had said over the phone the night before. "It won't feel real unless you're there." "Wouldn't miss it," Walter replied. "Wear the blue tie. Makes you look responsible." Daniel had laughed for the first time in weeks. He had no idea that by the next afternoon, that same tie would be twisted sideways as police officers pulled his arms behind his back in front of everyone he worked with. What nobody in that ballroom knew was that the real thief had been standing among them for months, hiding in plain sight, counting on the fact that no one would ever suspect the one man who followed every rule. The truth, buried beneath layers of falsified records and manipulated timestamps, was far uglier than anyone in that ballroom could have guessed. 3 months earlier, Meridian Logistics had begun losing money. Small discrepancies at first, easy to write off as accounting errors. A few $1,000s here, a shipment discrepancy there. But by the second month, the losses had grown too large to ignore. Nearly $200,000 in inventory and funds had vanished through a series of falsified purchase orders and rerouted shipments. The company's internal security team launched a quiet investigation, and that was where things went wrong, because the person actually responsible for the fraud, a regional finance coordinator named Preston Vale, had spent those same months carefully building a trail that led everywhere except back to himself. Preston had access to employee login credentials across departments due to his role auditing shipment records. He used that access to quietly route several fraudulent transactions through Daniel's login on nights Daniel wasn't even working. It was almost too easy. Daniel Carter was the perfect target. Reliable, trusted, rarely questioned. Exactly the kind of employee whose credentials could be exploited without anyone suspecting a thing, because who would ever imagine Daniel Carter, the single father who stayed 2 hours late every week without complaint, stealing from the company that had become his second family? When internal security flagged the pattern and handed their findings to corporate leadership, the trail pointed with damning clarity toward one employee ID number: Daniel's. Nobody dug deeper. Nobody cross-referenced his physical shift schedule against the timestamps of the fraudulent transactions. The evidence looked clean on paper, and paper was enough to secure a warrant. By the time officers arrived at Meridian Logistics that Friday morning, the case against Daniel Carter already felt closed in the eyes of everyone who mattered, everyone except the people who actually knew him. Back at the police station, Daniel sat alone in a small interview room, his promotion certificate still crumpled in his jacket pocket, forgotten in the chaos. His hands, finally free of the cuffs, trembled slightly as he rubbed his wrists. An officer entered and set a thin folder on the table. "Mr. Carter, I'm Detective Harmon." I'll be handling your case. Daniel looked up, exhausted. I want to see my son. We'll arrange a call once processing is complete. Detective, I need you to understand something. I have worked at that company for 6 years. I have never once taken so much as an extra pen from the supply closet. Whatever this evidence shows, it isn't me. Harmon opened the folder, scanning it briefly. The transactions in question were logged under your employee credentials, Mr. Carter. On multiple dates, during hours the system shows you accessing restricted financial software. Then your system is wrong, or someone used my login. I don't even know how to access that software. I've never had a reason to. Harmon studied him for a moment. Something in Daniel's voice, the exhaustion layered with genuine confusion rather than practiced denial, gave him a flicker of doubt. But doubt wasn't evidence, and evidence was what built cases. We'll review everything thoroughly, Harmon said. In the meantime, is there anyone we should contact regarding your son's care? Daniel's throat tightened. His name is Ethan. He's 8. His mother passed away 5 years ago. It's just been the two of us. There's a family friend, Walter Reyes. He already knows what's happening. He'll take care of him. Understood. As Harmon gathered the folder to leave, Daniel spoke again, quieter this time. Detective, I promoted today. 6 years of double shifts and missed birthdays and doing everything by the book. And today was supposed to be the day all of it paid off. My son was in the front row watching me walk up to get that certificate. And instead, he watched police officers put handcuffs on his father in front of 200 people. Harmon paused at the door. I understand this looks bad for you, and I understand you're scared. But my job is to follow evidence, not assumptions. Then follow it all the way, Daniel said. Because if you do, you'll find out I'm telling the truth. Harmon didn't respond. He simply nodded once and left the room, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Outside the station, Walter sat in his truck, phone pressed to his ear. Rick, I need everything you can pull. Employee access logs, shift schedules, security footage from the loading dock, anything tied to Meridian Logistics over the last 4 months. The voice on the other end, gravelly and unhurried, belonged to Rick Alvarez, a retired federal fraud investigator. Walter had served alongside in a joint operation nearly 15 years earlier. Different branch, same brotherhood. You said this kid's like family to you? He is family, Walter said. And I've watched him do nothing but work himself to the bone trying to give his son a decent life. Whoever set this up picked the wrong man to frame, because they didn't count on someone actually looking for the truth instead of the easiest answer. I'll need access to the company's internal systems. That's going to require cooperation from someone on the inside. Walter glanced through the windshield toward the police station entrance. Leave that to me. He ended the call and dialed another number. Renata Cole answered on the second ring, her voice still shaken. Walter, is he okay? Is there any word? He's holding on. But Renata, I need your help, and I need it fast. Can you get me into the building tonight? I need access to security footage, employee shift logs, anything from the last 4 months tied to that finance software the fraud ran through. I can try. I have manager-level access to most systems, but not everything. Some of that would need IT or corporate approval. Then let's start with what you can get, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Renata, listen to me. Somebody set that man up. Somebody who knew exactly how trusted he was, and used that trust like a weapon. I intend to find out who. There was a pause on the line. Walter, if you're right about this and someone deliberately framed him, that means whoever did it is still out there. Still working here. Still walking these halls like nothing happened. I know, Walter said grimly, which is exactly why we don't have much time. Quick favor before we keep going. If you're the kind of person who believes the truth always comes out eventually, tap that like button. Costs you nothing and it tells me exactly which stories to keep making. Now, back to Walter, standing in a dark parking lot, about to prove that this father did nothing wrong. Walter arrived at Meridian Logistics just after 8 that evening. The parking lot nearly empty except for a handful of cars belonging to employees working late. Renata was waiting by the side entrance, arms crossed against the evening chill, her badge already in hand. I pulled what I could, she said, leading him inside. But Walter, I have to be honest with you. If corporate finds out I let you into these systems without authorization, I could lose my job. Then let's make sure that doesn't happen, Walter said. Show me what you have. They walked through darkened hallways to a small security office near the back of the building, where a single monitor glowed against the dim light. Renata sat down and began pulling up files. This is the transaction log the fraud team flagged. Every entry tied to Daniel's employee ID. Walter leaned in, studying the screen. Dates, times, dollar amounts. Each one logged under Daniel Carter's credentials, accessing a financial software platform used for approving vendor payments. Pull up his shift schedule for these same dates, Walter said. Renata typed quickly, cross-referencing the two documents. Her hands slowed. Walter, look at this. She pointed to the screen, her voice rising with disbelief. March 14th. The system shows Daniel logging into the finance platform at 11:47 at night, but his shift schedule shows he clocked out at 4:30 that afternoon. He wasn't even in the building. Keep going. Renata pulled up the next date. Then the next. Same pattern. Every single fraudulent transaction happened hours after his shift ended. Sometimes on days he wasn't even scheduled to work at all. Walter felt something settle in his chest. The quiet, focused calm he remembered from years of missions where the smallest detail meant the difference between success and disaster. Somebody used his login when he wasn't here, Walter said, which means either they had his password or they had a way to access the system without one. That would require serious internal access. IT-level access or something close to it. Who has that kind of access? Renata hesitated. A handful of people. IT administrators, senior finance staff, and, she paused, scrolling through a separate directory. Preston Vale. He's the finance coordinator who actually flagged the discrepancies to corporate in the first place. Walter's eyes narrowed. The man who found the fraud has access to fake it. Walter, that doesn't mean anything on its own. Lots of people in finance would have that access. Maybe. But most of them didn't personally walk the evidence up the chain and point the finger at Daniel Carter. Pull his access logs. Same dates. Renata's fingers moved across the keyboard, hesitant at first, then faster as the picture began forming. Oh my God, what is it? Preston Vale logged into the building using his keycard on 4 of the 5 nights those fraudulent transactions occurred. Late at night, after everyone else had gone home. Walter straightened, pulling out his phone. I need Rick to see this right now. While Renata continued pulling records, Walter dialed his old friend, putting the call on speaker. Rick, I've got names, dates, and access logs. I need you to tell me if this holds up. Send it over, Rick said. But Walter, even with this, it's circumstantial. Being in the building doesn't prove he committed fraud. You need something that ties him directly to the falsified transactions. Renata was already typing again. There's security footage from the loading dock and the finance office corridor. If he was in the building those nights, there should be camera footage of him actually walking to his desk. Pull it, Walter said. Took nearly 40 minutes. Renata worked quickly, cross-referencing timestamps, pulling archived footage from the building's internal security system. Walter stood behind her the entire time, arms crossed, watching each frame with the same patience that had once kept him still for hours in a hide site waiting for a single moving target to appear. Finally, Renata paused the footage. There. March 14th, 11:42 p.m. The grainy black and white image showed a man walking down the finance office corridor. Badge swipe unlocking the door, entering the very room where the fraudulent transaction would be logged 5 minutes later. The image was imperfect, the angle awkward, but the build, the walk, the slight limp from an old ankle injury Walter remembered Preston mentioning once at a company barbecue. All of it matched. That's him, Renata whispered. That's Preston. Walter felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease, just slightly. Now we need to know why, he said. $200,000 doesn't disappear into nothing. Somebody's spending it, hiding it, or paying off a debt with it. Rick, can you run a financial background check? See if Preston Vale has any red flags. Debt, gambling, Anything that would explain why a man with a stable finance job would risk everything to steal from his own company. Give me 20 minutes. While they waited, Renata sat back in her chair, rubbing her temples. I've worked with Preston for 3 years. He always seemed normal, quiet, reliable. Honestly, I never would have suspected him. That's exactly why it worked, Walter said. Nobody suspects the reliable ones. That's what makes them dangerous when they turn. Renata looked up at him. How did you know? How did you know it wasn't Daniel? Walter considered the question for a long moment before answering. Because I've spent my life reading people under pressure. In combat, you learn fast that panic and guilt look completely different from fear and confusion. Daniel wasn't panicking today because he got caught. He was panicking because he was terrified of losing everything he built for his son, over something he didn't do. I've seen guilty men lie. I've seen innocent men break. What I saw in that ballroom today wasn't a man hiding something. It was a man watching his whole world collapse for no reason he could understand. Renata's eyes glistened slightly. I hope you're right. I know I'm right. What Walter didn't know yet was that the man he was about to confront was sitting less than 60 feet away, and he was already trying to erase every trace of what he had done. Rick called back exactly 22 minutes later. Walter, you're going to want to sit down for this. Go ahead. Preston Vale has been quietly bleeding money for over a year. Gambling debts, mostly sports betting apps, nearly $180,000 owed to at least 3 different platforms. Some of it tied to illegal offshore accounts that don't exactly send polite reminder emails when payments are late. Walter closed his eyes briefly. There's the motive. There's more, Rick continued. One of those debts got escalated 2 months ago. Threatening messages, the kind that make a man desperate enough to do something stupid. Walter, I think you found your fraud. Send everything you have to Detective Harmon at the precinct. Immediately. Already on it. Walter ended the call and turned to Renata. I need you to pull one more thing. Preston's work schedule tomorrow. I want to know exactly where he'll be. He's actually here tonight, Renata said, checking a separate system. Working late in the finance office. Building access shows he badged in about 40 minutes ago. Walter's jaw tightened. He's here right now. Walter, wait, what are you going to do? Walter was already moving toward the door. I'm going to have a conversation. Renata hurried after him. You can't just confront him. If he panics, he could destroy evidence or worse. I'm not going to confront him, Walter said, slowing his pace slightly. I'm going to observe him. There's a difference. You call Detective Harmon right now. Tell him what we found. Tell him Preston Vale is in the building tonight, and if he wants to close this case cleanly, he needs officers here within the hour. Renata nodded, already dialing. Walter made his way quietly through the darkened hallways toward the finance department. Years of training allowing him to move without drawing attention, staying in shadow, watching from a distance through the glass wall of Preston's office. Inside, Preston sat hunched over his desk, typing rapidly, glancing nervously at his phone every few seconds. Walter watched him delete something from his screen, then immediately open another program, hands trembling slightly. He's covering his tracks, Walter thought. He knows something's coming. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled quietly into the parking lot, followed by Detective Harmon's unmarked sedan. Harmon met Walter and Renata near the front entrance, folder in hand. Your friend Rick sent over quite a bit of information, Harmon said. Financial records, access logs, security footage. If even half of this checks out, we have a serious problem with our original case against Daniel Carter. It's not half, Walter said. It's all of it. Preston Vale framed an innocent man to cover his own theft, and he's sitting in that office right now trying to erase whatever evidence is left. Harmon exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I need to see this footage myself before I move on anything. Then look fast, Walter said, because every minute we stand here talking is another minute he has to destroy what's left of the trail. Harmon studied Walter for a moment, something in the older man's steady, unshakable presence cutting through the usual skepticism detectives reserved for civilians inserting themselves into investigations. You really care about this guy, Harmon said. It wasn't quite a question. He's the closest thing to family I have left, Walter answered simply. And right now, his son is sitting at home wondering if his father is coming back. I'm not leaving this building until that changes. Harmon nodded slowly. Show me the footage. 10 minutes later, standing in the security office reviewing the same time-stamped video Walter and Renata had found, Harmon's expression shifted from doubt to grim understanding. This is enough to bring him in for questioning, Harmon said. Combined with the financial records your friend pulled, we might actually be able to unwind this whole thing tonight. Then let's go get him, Walter said. They moved together down the hallway, two uniformed officers flanking Harmon, Walter and Renata trailing behind. When they reached the finance office, Preston looked up from his desk, eyes widening as he registered the small crowd standing in his doorway. Preston Vale, Harmon said, stepping forward. I need you to step away from your computer. Preston's hand hovered over the keyboard for half a second too long. Detective, I don't understand. Is this about the fraud case? I already gave you everything I found. You gave us everything you wanted us to find, Harmon said. We have security footage placing you in this office at 11:42 p.m. on March 14th, the exact time the fraudulent transaction under Daniel Carter's credentials was logged. We also have your financial records showing significant gambling debt escalating over the past year. Would you like to explain that? Preston's face went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. For a long moment, nobody spoke. His voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was going to fix it before anyone noticed. You framed an innocent man, Walter said quietly, stepping forward despite Harmon's warning glance. You let him get arrested in front of his own son. In front of 200 people on the day he earned a promotion he worked 6 years for. Do you understand what you did to that family today? Preston's eyes filled with tears, his composure finally shattering completely. Panicked. The people I owed money to, they weren't the kind of people who send polite reminders. I was scared. Daniel's credentials were just available. I never wanted anyone to actually get hurt. I just needed time. Time you stole from a child who thought he might never see his father again, Walter said, his voice low and hard. Harmon stepped between them gently. That's enough. Mr. Vale, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and falsifying company records. As officers moved to handcuff Preston, Walter turned away, already pulling out his phone. Detective Harmon called out after him. Where are you going? To get Daniel Carter out of that cell, Walter said. And then I'm taking him home to his son. It was nearly 11 o'clock that night when Daniel heard footsteps approaching his holding cell. He had barely eaten, barely spoken, sitting with his head in his hands, replaying the moment Ethan's face crumpled with fear over and over in his mind. Detective Harmon appeared at the cell door, keys in hand. Mr. Carter. Daniel looked up, exhausted. Is there news? We found the person responsible for the fraud. A finance coordinator named Preston Vale used your login credentials to hide his own theft while covering significant gambling debts. He's in custody now. Daniel stared at him, unable to process the words for a moment. So, I'm free? This is over? All charges against you are being dropped, effective immediately. I owe you an apology, Mr. Carter. We moved too fast on incomplete evidence, and that's on us. That's on me. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, the weight of the entire day finally crashing down at once. My son, he whispered. I need to see my son. He's outside, Harmon said gently. Someone's been waiting with him this whole time. The cell door opened, and Daniel walked out on unsteady legs, following Harmon down the hallway toward the front of the station. As they rounded the corner, he saw them. Walter, standing near the entrance, one hand resting on Ethan's shoulder. And Ethan, the moment he saw his father, broke free and ran. Daddy! Daniel dropped to his knees just in time to catch his son in his arms, holding him so tightly neither of them could breathe properly, both of them crying, the sound echoing through the quiet station lobby. I'm here, buddy. I'm here. I told you I would come home. I was so scared. Ethan sobbed into his father's shoulder. I thought they were going to keep you forever. Never, Daniel whispered fiercely. Nothing in this world could keep me away from you. Do you hear me? Nothing. Walter stood back, watching quietly, the same calm expression he always wore, though his eyes glistened slightly under the fluorescent lights. After a long moment, Daniel looked up at him over Ethan's shoulder. Walter, you did this. You found the truth. Walter shook his head, crouching down to their level. I didn't do anything you wouldn't have done for me. I just made a few phone calls and asked the right questions. The truth was always there. It just needed someone willing to look for it instead of settling for the easy answer. Daniel reached out with one arm, pulling Walter into the embrace alongside Ethan. Thank you, Daniel said, voice breaking. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't owe me anything, Walter said firmly. Family doesn't keep score. The next morning, Daniel returned to Meridian Logistics, uncertain of what to expect. He walked through the front doors slowly, half-braced for stares, whispers, judgment. Instead, he found the entire office staff gathered in the lobby, the same banner from the day before still hanging above the stage, though someone had added a handwritten addition beneath it that read, "We believe in you, Daniel." Renata stepped forward first, eyes red from lack of sleep. Daniel, I am so sorry. I should have fought harder yesterday. I should have. You did everything you could, Daniel said gently, and you helped clear my name last night. That's more than I could have asked for. Applause broke out across the lobby, hesitant at first, then growing into something warmer, more certain. Co-workers who had watched him get led away in handcuffs the day before now stepped forward to shake his hand, to apologize, to welcome him back. Renata raised her voice over the crowd. Effective today, Daniel Carter is officially our new senior operations manager. And after everything this company put him through yesterday, corporate has approved a full year of paid leave should he need it, along with covering any legal fees incurred, and establishing a full college fund for his son as a formal apology for what happened. Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed, as the applause grew louder. Later that afternoon, sitting on the porch of Walter's small house, Daniel watched Ethan and Walter fishing in the pond behind the property, laughter drifting across the yard for the first time in what felt like forever. You know, Daniel said as Walter approached, handing him a glass of iced tea, yesterday was the worst day of my life, and somehow, it turned into proof that I'm not as alone as I sometimes feel. Walter lowered himself into the chair beside him with a quiet grunt, years of old injuries settling into his bones. You were never alone, Daniel. You just forgot to look around and see who was standing beside you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Ethan reel in a small fish, screaming with delight loud enough to startle a nearby flock of birds. Walter, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you do all this? Really? You could have just made a phone call to a lawyer and let the system handle it. Walter was quiet for a long moment, staring out over the water. Because I spent 22 years serving people I never met, protecting freedoms for strangers I'd never know. And when I finally came home, I realized the most important mission I'd ever have wasn't overseas. It was making sure the people right in front of me never had to face their darkest moments alone. You and that boy became my family the day I sat on your porch after Sarah passed. Family doesn't stop showing up just because the storm gets bigger. Daniel's eyes filled again, though this time, the tears felt lighter. Ethan and I are lucky to have you. No, Walter said, watching the boy laugh in the distance. I'm the lucky one. That evening, after Ethan fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the emotional whirlwind of the past 2 days, Daniel sat beside him, gently brushing his hair back from his forehead. He thought about the promotion certificate still crumpled in his jacket pocket, forgotten during the chaos of the arrest. He thought about the handcuffs, the humiliation, the fear that had gripped him in that ballroom. And he thought about how none of it mattered anymore, not really, because in the end, truth had won. Family had shown up, and somehow, through the worst day of his life, he had learned just how deep his support truly ran. Life didn't become perfect overnight. Bills still needed paying. Grief for Sarah still surfaced on quiet evenings when Ethan asked questions about the mother he barely remembered. Work would still bring long hours and heavy responsibilities. But now, Father and son understood something they would carry with them forever. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives reveal the truest measure of the people who love us. Sometimes justice moves slowly, but it moves. And sometimes the quiet man standing at the back of the room, the one nobody expects, turns out to be exactly the hero you needed all along. Because real strength was never about the uniform or the medals or the title on a certificate. Real strength was a father who never stopped fighting for his son, and a friend who never stopped fighting for the truth. If the story moved you, type the words "truth always wins" in the comments below, so other people scrolling past can see how many of us still believe it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe so the next story finds you the moment it goes live. Because sometimes the strongest heroes are not the ones wearing uniforms or medals. Sometimes they are simply single parents who wake up every morning, keep their promises, protect their children, and quietly choose hope over despair.